You may be wondering what a magic trick for an orangutan has to do with the Science TEKS Streamlining. What I wanted you to take away is that what you see is not always what you get. I really doubt that that card was teleported through the glass so that the orangutan could grab it. Now, what you're going to see in this video are some proposed changes for the first draft of the Science TEKS that have been streamlined. Before we get to those standards, I wanted to start with a timeline of what the process is going to look like and where we currently are. So in October, end of September, beginning of October, the first draft of the streamlined Science TEKS were released, which means that we are currently in the official public comment period for those first drafts. So if you really feel strongly about one of the changes that the Streamlining Committee has made, at the end of this video, I will show you how you can submit feedback to them before the official comment period ends December 16th. After the official comment period ends, those suggestions will go back to the Science TEKS Streamlining Committees, and they will look at those and they will make any revisions that they feel necessary from that comment period. So sometime in January, after they've made those recommendations, those will be sent to the State Board of Education and posted on the TEA website. They will go to a public hearing for first reading and filing authorization, at which point another public comment period will open, which should close around April. Now, according to the best information I could find, that public comment period is going to end sometime around April 16th. So that during the April 18th through 21st meeting of the State Board of Education, they can have the public hearing and second reading and final adoption of the Science TEKS that have been streamlined. What that means is we will get the final adopted streamlined science text about a month before school's out, which means that our curriculum cadres, depending on how extensive the changes are, might have a lot of work to do this summer. So the first thing to notice is the color coding. Anything that's got a strike through as red is deleted. Anything that's strike through in purple has been moved. And if it's not struck through, then that's the new location for it. And anything in blue is going to be clarifying language. So as I go through here, you'll see these yellow highlights. Those are things that I highlighted to kind of point out that I thought were kind of interesting. So one of the goals was for the Streamlining Committee to make the text more consistent in language throughout K through 12. So you'll notice that they've taken out some words that may not be developmentally appropriate and or appropriate for the expectation. So in this one, it says the students observe the natural world using their five senses was the original language. Their senses is what they are proposing. And the reason they say that is because that makes it consistent with the rest of the student expectations. Down here at the next one, you'll see that they removed and mass from the relative size and mass because the idea of mass really isn't appropriate for kindergarten. Now on 3B, make predictions based on observable patterns in nature, such as the shape of leaves. This is actually in the process skill. So the Streamlining Committee took that out because it's really talking about a type of content. It's too narrow for a process standard. Down here at 7A, originally with observe, describe, and compare, the TEKS Streamlining Committee felt that that was not the correct place to put compare. Really, kindergarten should be observing and describing, not comparing. So you'll see they put a clarification note that that was moved to second grade to create a progression of rigor. So here we observe and describe, and then by the time we get to second grade, they should be able to compare. Now, I think the clarifying statement for 10B is actually really interesting. According to the committee, there are multiple viewpoints about whether or not to leave the such as statements in the text. Now, originally, those were intended to give guidance to teachers, and they were not necessarily supposed to be tested on the STAR test. What has happened, because assessment and curriculum are separate, is that they have been assessed specifically on the STAR test. So I think that might have influenced their decision to kind of strike through those specific things. Now, the other thing that you'll see here is that if we are identifying the parts of the plant, the expectation is that the teacher should know the parts of the plant, root, stem, and leaves, and the parts of an animal, such as the head, eyes, and limbs. At the same time, I can see their other viewpoint, that we're really just making it specific to identifying those specific parts. That way we don't have to worry about teachers taking it too far or too deep. But at the same time, I see the other side of the point, which is to say that the teachers know the content and they can say, okay, these are the parts of the plant that the kids should be able to identify, or the parts of the animal that they should be able to identify. So we're going to skip ahead to first grade. This is TEKS 1.5a. It says to classify objects. The addition here is by the material from which they are made, and observable properties, which they struck through the other part because they moved that to the front, such as larger, smaller, heavier, lighter, shape, color, and texture. So the intent in doing that was that the classifying of materials and observable properties for those materials should be a little sooner. So classify objects by the material from which they are made and observable properties. To the committee, that just seemed to make more sense. Now, I highlighted the clarification statement over on 1.5b because I thought that was great, that the committees took into account whether or not the standard was developmentally appropriate. So in this case, they said predict and identify changes in materials caused by heating and cooling, such as ice melting, water freezing, and water evaporating. Now, the committee, as they talked through it, was thinking that this implies that we would need to teach the water cycle to first grade, which really is not developmentally appropriate. So they decided to take that out so that teachers could focus on just identifying changes in materials caused by heating and cooling, not just water, but any material. I thought this change to second grade was also interesting. Traditionally, second grade has done non-standard measurement. That's kind of been where it's always fallen for science. So in this case, they actually struck out non-standard measurement tools. So collect data and observations from equipment such as hand lenses, primary balances, thermometers, and measurement tools. Now the interesting thing is they took that out. It says second grade math requires standard measurements and need cross-curricular consistency. So the idea there is that they're trying to align better with math. The last interesting thing that I saw in the K2 document was the very last standard, 2.10c, and they added a such as statement. Now, sometimes they take it out, sometimes they add it in to offer clarification. So in this case, they added clarifications for grasshoppers and butterfly undergoing a life cycle, and they added that clarification so the scope of this SE vertically aligns with other texts in K5. So that's kind of the roundup of K2. Next, we're going to look at 3.5. So it's interesting that the first thing that kind of popped up in mind was actually something that came up during planning. If you look at this strike through, it says to show work being done. Now, the committee actually said to strike through that because they felt that it aligns with the new proposed deletion of work from TEKS 7.7a. So the survey of responses support deleting work from 3.6b. Work is actually kind of a complex idea when you talk about it scientifically. Like we always say, oh, you're working hard, but science has a very specific definition of work, and so to see that they have removed that, I think that was probably why. Now, as we go down to the next couple of pages, there really weren't a whole lot of significant changes in 3 through 5. Now, they have deleted and consolidated some, so here's an example of a duplicate in third grade as well that was duplicated in fourth grade, so they've gone ahead and taken that one out. And then as we go to fourth grade, we can see that there is another duplicate TEKS in a different grade level as 3.5C, so they've gone ahead and deleted that one. Predict changes caused by heating and cooling, such as ice becoming liquid or water. When you have that same standard in two different grade levels, it makes it hard to differentiate, okay, what are the students supposed to be doing in third grade versus fourth grade. Now this was an interesting addition. In science we have three types of investigations: descriptive, comparative, and experimental. And the committee has gone and clarified and said, okay, not just an experiment, but we want the students to design a descriptive investigation to explore the effects of force. That makes this standard consistent with the definition of a descriptive investigation. To test something is very specific to the experimental design, which students really don't start doing until 5th grade, where they're doing a fair test. You can see there were quite a few changes here as well, as they kind of changed the wording, moved things around, and added some clarification. That brings us into 5th grade, where you can see there were a couple of strike-throughs, just trying to get rid of some extra information to be consistent. Here we have an addition: draw or develop a model that represents how something works or looks that cannot be seen, such as the Earth, Sun, Moon system and formation of sedimentary rock. So the clarification: new example aligns with content that is consistent for the grade level. No impact on instructional materials, as these models can be drawn by students. So here they've taken out an entire standard, identify the boiling and freezing points of water on the Celsius scale. If you look at kind of the traditional testing of this, typically it gives something like there's a temperature outside and there's ice on a house. Will it melt or will it not? It's really kind of a memorization question typically, and so that's why they've decided to strike through this one according to the notes. Now another one here that struck through that I did not highlight was 6B. Requires a complete path through which electric current can pass. They decided that that concept of a closed path appears in 4th grade, so they didn't really need to define that in the standard. So it really just kind of cleans up the language a little bit for that standard. And then here you'll see that we're designing an investigation. They don't say what kind, but it should test the effects of force on an object. Now, if this is being done in 5th grade, then that could be a fair test experimental design. So really here is kind of our getting to the end of this. They've taken out identify the significance of the carbon dioxide cycle to the survival of plants because they felt it was not developmentally appropriate. And you can see that they also took out 10C, described the differences between complete and incomplete metamorphosis. The thinking was, we've already talked kind of a lot about life cycles in grades 2 through 4, so do we really need to do that again in 5th grade? So there's kind of an overview of the changes that have been recommended and why they've been recommended by the committee. I hope you'll take a time to look at those and provide feedback. If you want to do that, you can simply go to TEA's website. Under Curriculum, Curriculum Standards, TEKS, Texas Essential Knowledge and Skills Review, you'll see the Science TEKS Streamlining. Talks a little bit about the background, talks about the draft recommendations, and how long they'll be available for the first draft comment period. If you have any comments for TEA, you can email those to teks@tea.texas.gov, and just make sure you put Science TEKS Streamlining in the subject line. Sorry I wasn't able to go through this with you guys in person. I'm actually at TCELA today learning more about the TEKS streamlining process and what changes are coming around for science from the state level. So I'll be happy to report on all of that information once I get back in district. And I hope you guys are having a great time at Principal as Learning Leader. And if you have any questions, feel free to email me, Jason_Bowman@allenisd.org.